was wondering, as I said in my intro, you know, the film is kind of shedding light on something I think certainly in the UK, you know, we're maybe not as aware of what conditions are like for Native women living in America and how they're being treated, especially those that are working in, you know, sex work and drug dealing and things like that. What do you hope that, I suppose, broader audiences take away from the film, but I suppose especially audiences that might not be as familiar with Native culture?
Yeah, I think, like, listen, missing and murdered Indigenous humans, like a lot of people say women, but it's men and children and as well. It's an epidemic in our communities. We're all faced with either knowing people who've gone missing, having family members who've gone missing. It's a very present, everyday thing. And we wanted to talk about that topic, but have it be in the background versus like a trauma story. Like, it's not, like, we never show a dead body. We never talk about the details of how Tawi, you know, dies, and we were really mindful of that. And I think too, like, you know, we also have forced removal is still happening in our communities, and like a big Ikwa case was just at the Supreme Court, where they're still going in and like removing children from the only worlds that they know and from the nations that they live in. And so we wanted that stuff to be present. And like, I used to be a sex worker, I used to be a stripper, I used to, in my mind I was like, we can't just show like this model minority. Like, we have to understand that just because Tawi works as a dancer at a strip club and a sex worker doesn't mean that she's not worthy of being found. Like, anyone who goes missing is worthy of being found. And so sometimes we get questioned, like, but they're stealing, but she was like a stripper, and I'm like, so what? That's the point. Like, the point is that these women are going missing and nobody's looking for them. And these were topics that were important to us, but we wanted to ground the storytelling in love and joy and connection. And hopefully we give an audience some catharsis at the end, knowing that the wheels of justice are still going to be spinning after the credits roll, and it's probably not going to be the happiest of endings, but we know that in that moment of connection that they're going to be okay.
That's really beautiful.
Yes.
I just want to add one quick thing, and this is something that I've recently recognized in the way that I talk about this topic as well, is that we say missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's MMIW. If you ever hear that, that's what we say in America. It's how we recognize this topic. But I think it's important to underscore that these women they don't just disappear into thin air. They're being stolen. They're being taken. They're being kidnapped. There are people on the other side of these missing women's stories that are systematically removing these women from their communities. And it's important that we talk about that and the sickness in that and how we heal that part of it as well.
So I believe we've got a microphone. If we've got any audience questions? Yes, one person there in the second row.
Thank you for a beautiful film. It's so nice to see a film about women, by women, for everybody. I have heard of that issue before, and I'm wondering, what do you think can be done? What is being done for like the root causes? I'm just wondering, do you know anything about that?
I think the first thing that we have to talk about is Native sovereignty, and the fact that Native nations in the United States are sovereign nations, and we're not being treated as such. And we continue a long legacy of colonization and genocide, where the treaties and the agreements that were made continue to not be upheld. And it's lawless by design. Who do you call? You can't call the state police. They don't have jurisdiction. You can't have your own police because there's not enough resources, nor can your own police in Native country arrest white people, right? Like, there's all these systems in place. And so I think, like, one of the big things that we need to talk about when we talk about Indian country and Native American issues is sovereignty, and going back to what was promised in the beginning of the United States that has not been upheld one day since its founding.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that I think resource extraction endeavors by outside corporations, by the U.S. government, they bring in, as you saw in the film, these man camps, and man camps are these huge, essentially trailer parks where oil workers are brought in from outside areas to work in the oil fields in these resource-rich environments, which often happen to be on native reservations. And when you bring in an influx of outside male energy with lawlessness, with no recourse, then you kind of have a recipe for disaster where you're basically given a permission slip to do with Native women as you wish, and there's never going to be any justice for them. And so once people realize that, then they kind of just run with it. And also, I'm from Alaska, where we live in isolated communities where you can't get in by car or by road. It's by ferry or by plane, and it can often take weeks to get even a police officer, let alone a federal officer who actually has the jurisdiction to be in that area. So yeah, I think cracking down on jurisdictional issues and resource extraction are two major points that we could have an impact on.
Thank you.
And there was a question, I think, in the third row. Yes.
Thank you guys so much for making this film and being here to talk with us. I was just wondering, on the point of the use of the language, I recently read Firekeeper's Daughter, which also is a story about kind of MMIW situations, but also a story about community and some of the joy kind of in that too. But the author has a note in there about how she didn't include a glossary because she was hoping that the use of the language would be kind of intuitive enough that people would kind of get it. And she felt like putting in a glossary would separate it and make it feel dead, make it feel archaic in a way that she didn't want to do, because so many of these cultures are very vibrant still, even though overlooked. And I was just wondering if you guys could speak to, when you were writing it, how you chose the moments to use the language and the moments to kind of keep it in English, and the interplay between those moments.
Yeah, I think one of the things when we were writing this, I was spending a lot of time on Six Nations where there are like bilingual kids finally that are learning, and I was witness to learning the language myself and I was doing 8 hours of immersion during the day, and then when we would be out, we would be popping in and out of Cayuga as things we didn't understand, or we were trying to stay in the language as much as possible. And so we just found moments that were kind of the most emotional, or when they needed to kind of like say something as an aside or something, and sometimes they're using it as a weapon, as a way to like keep other people from hearing what they're talking about. And so we kind of just found natural places to have the language pop in and out. And one of the things that is, I tell this story when we do the Q&As, but Mitchie's actually here, so it's fun because she's here. But on the very first day, I worked with, we had a language supervisor that I had actually gone through immersion with, Kisa Parker, who was there on the set. We did 2 weeks of immersion with Lily and Isabel. And so they were learning the language and they were learning their lines, but they were also learning how to speak certain words like that you could learn in 2 weeks. And then on the first day, we made lanyards for everyone, and Kisa and I worked with elders to come up with, because the language has essentially been dead since the 1950s. It hasn't evolved because it hasn't been used in every day. So there aren't words for computer or like things that, so we came up with all the set calls, so like action and cut and moving on and sound speeds. And so we had these lanyards. And by the third day, everyone on the set didn't even have to look down at the lanyards anymore, but we wanted the language to feel vibrant and in use, not just on screen, but have it be something that was actively in use as we were making the film. And then one time, Mitchie was working on like an overnight set or whatever and texted me and was like, I just yelled, they stop, which means cut. And she'd been tired on like an overnight set and was like, using the Cayuga was what came to her first. And I was like, yes, success.
It's so engraved in me. think that is all we have time for, but thank you so much to the team behind Fancy Dance for being here today, for bringing us your film.
And can I just say, just to Tommy Oliver, who's standing up here, like, we need more producers in this industry who see the value of scripts like this and like believe in us enough to like write the checks and believe in the stories, and we need them to believe in audiences like you who find value in stories like these. So thank you so much, Tommy, for the opportunity to make this film and being here with us today.